My boss's son fired me the second he took control of the company. We don't need people like you anymore, he said. I just smiled and nodded politely. The very next day his father was screaming at him. What the hell were you thinking? Did you even look at the contracts? Because the agreement. We don't need people like you anymore. Connor Mitchell said it without even looking up from his laptop. 26 years old, designer suit, freshly minted MBA from Wharton, and he was firing me, Aubrey Caldwell, from the company I'd spent 16 years building from the ground up. I just smiled, nodded politely, and walked out. Before we continue, if you believe loyalty and hard work should be valued over entitlement, please hit that subscribe button. It's free and helps us share these stories. Now let's see what happens next. What that entitled child didn't know was that his father, Sean Mitchell, had put a clause in my contract 6 years ago. A golden parachute clause. 3 times my annual salary if I was terminated without cause. That's $780,000 he just handed me without even checking the paperwork. But here's the thing that would really cost him. I wasn't the only one with that clause. The very next morning I was sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee when my phone rang. Sean's name lit up the screen, and I could hear the panic in his voice before he even finished his first sentence. Aubrey, what the hell happened yesterday? In the background I heard him screaming at Connor. What were you thinking? Did you even look at the contracts? I took another sip of coffee and smiled. Because the agreement Connor signed when he fired me? It was about to destroy everything he thought he'd inherited. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in that kitchen, listening to Sean Mitchell realize his son had just made $1 million mistake. My name is Aubrey Caldwell. I'm 54 years old, and until yesterday afternoon, I was the Chief Operating Officer at Mitchell Industrial Solutions in Columbus, Ohio. We manufacture precision automation equipment for automotive plants across the country. The kind of machinery that keeps assembly lines running 24 hours a day without breaking down. It's not glamorous work. Nobody writes magazine articles about industrial equipment or gives TED Talks about production efficiency. But it's essential, and it's what I've been doing for the past 16 years. I wasn't the flashy executive who gave keynote speeches at industry conferences. I wasn't the one whose photo appeared in trade publications or who got interviewed about market trends. I was the person who made sure everything actually worked. The one suppliers called at midnight when they had questions about specifications. The one who knew every employee's name and remembered that Marcus's daughter was starting college this year, that Rachel's mother had Alzheimer's, that Denise was saving up for a down payment on a house. My late husband James used to joke that I ran Mitchell Industrial the way I ran our household, with quiet efficiency and a stubborn refusal to let anything fall through the cracks. He'd been dead for 16 years now, killed in a car accident on a rainy November evening when our daughters Emma and Sophie were still in high school. 15 and 17 years old, and suddenly they didn't have a father anymore. The grief nearly destroyed me. I spent months moving through life like I was underwater, everything muffled and distant and wrong. James had been the fun parent, the one who made pancakes on Saturday mornings and knew all the words to Disney songs and could make the girls laugh even when they were being difficult teenagers. I was the practical one, the scheduler, the one who made sure homework got done and bills got paid on time. When he died, I had to become both. And I barely managed to be one. Sean Mitchell hired me 3 months after the accident, when I was 38 years old and desperate for something to pour myself into besides that crushing, endless sadness. I showed up to the interview in a borrowed suit because I'd lost so much weight my own clothes hung off me like I was a child playing dress-up. My resume was impressive on paper. Operations management experience, mechanical engineering degree from Ohio State, proven track record of streamlining production processes. But Sean didn't hire me for my credentials. He hired me because he saw something in my eyes that day. Hunger. Desperation. The kind of determination that comes from having no safety net and everything to prove. I don't need someone who wants this job, he told me, leaning back in his chair in the cramped office that would later become mine. I need someone who can't afford to fail at it. That's the person who'll help me build something that lasts. He'd been right. Within 3 years, I'd streamlined our production process, cutting waste by 30% without sacrificing quality. I'd established relationships with every major automotive manufacturer in the Midwest, learning their needs and their pain points and exactly what they expected from their suppliers. I'd helped grow Mitchell Industrial from a struggling $2 million operation that was barely keeping the lights on to a $15 million success story with contracts stretching from Detroit to Kentucky. Sean promoted me to Chief Operating Officer when I was 43 years old, making me one of the few women in operations leadership in our industry. Came with a title, a raise, and a corner office with windows that actually opened. But more than that, it came with respect. The kind of respect you can't buy or fake or demand. The kind you have to earn through years of showing up early, staying late, and consistently delivering results. It wasn't friendship exactly. Sean kept professional boundaries, never invited me to family dinners or weekend barbecues, never asked about my personal life beyond polite inquiries about how my daughters were doing. But there was something deeper than friendship between us. A mutual understanding. A recognition that we were both builders, both people who took pride in creating something solid and reliable in a world that increasingly valued flash over substance. When my youngest daughter Sophie got accepted to Northwestern University but the financial aid package wasn't enough, Sean personally restructured my compensation package to make it possible. No big announcement, no fanfare, just a quiet conversation in his office one afternoon and updated paperwork that gave my daughter the education she deserved. I tried to thank him, but he'd waved me off. Your work speaks for itself, Aubrey. This is just making sure the numbers reflect that. When his wife Marie battled breast cancer 5 years ago, I returned the favor in the only way I knew how. I coordinated the entire company's schedule so Sean could be with her for every chemotherapy session, every doctor's appointment, every bad day when she couldn't get out of bed and needed him beside her. We juggled meetings and rearranged production schedules and made it work because that's what you do for people who matter. Marie survived, thank God. And Sean never forgot what I'd done during those awful months. We built something together over those 16 years, Sean and I. Not just a company but a culture. A place where people mattered, where quality wasn't sacrificed for quarterly profit margins, where a handshake agreement still meant something in an industry increasingly dominated by lawyers who'd never touched a piece of machinery in their lives. My daughters grew up during those years. Emma became a nurse, working nights in the ICU at Cleveland Clinic and calling me every Sunday morning like clockwork. Sophie became a third-grade teacher in Chicago, sending me photos of her students' artwork and stories about the funny things 6-year-olds say when they're trying to understand the world. Mitchell Industrial became my second family. The place where I'd rebuilt myself after losing James. The place where I'd proved I was more than just a widow struggling to survive. And then 8 months ago everything started to shift. Connor Mitchell came back from Wharton Business School with his fancy MBA and his 50-page reports about disrupting the industry and optimizing legacy operations. He was Sean's only child, 26 years old, spoiled in that particular way that comes from being the sole focus of wealthy parents' attention and expectations. He'd spent most of his 20s bouncing between business school and a tech startup in Miami that had burned through $2 million of his father's money before collapsing spectacularly. The startup had promised to revolutionize restaurant delivery using drone technology. It lasted 18 months before regulatory issues and basic logistical problems. Turns out drones can't actually carry hot food through city traffic safely. Killed it completely. But Connor talked about the failure like it was a learning experience, a necessary step on his entrepreneurial journey. He showed up at Mitchell Industrial with that particular brand of confidence that comes from never having faced real consequences for being wrong. Sean asked me to mentor him. To show him how the company actually worked, from the production floor to the supplier relationships to the client accounts that kept us profitable. I agreed because Sean asked, and because part of me hoped that Connor might actually learn something if he spent enough time seeing how things really operated. Connor shadowed me for 2 weeks, following me through the production floor with his tablet and his expensive noise-canceling headphones, asking surface-level questions about processes he didn't really want to understand. He'd interrupt production meetings to suggest innovations that showed he'd fundamentally misunderstood what we did. He'd talk about implementing AI and automation without grasping that our clients paid premium prices specifically because we offered customization and precision that algorithms couldn't replicate. After 2 weeks, he submitted a 50-page proposal to Sean recommending we outsource 40% of our manufacturing to cut costs. The presentation was slick, full of charts and graphs and projected profit margins that looked impressive if you didn't know anything about how industrial equipment actually worked. I pulled Sean aside in his office one afternoon, the autumn sun streaming through the blinds, casting long shadows across his desk. If we do this, we'll lose quality control, I told him quietly, keeping my voice professional even though I wanted to shake him. Our reputation is built on precision. One batch of defective components and we'll lose contracts worth millions. You know this, Sean. You built this company on reliability. He'd nodded slowly, his weathered hands folded on the desk between us. I know, Aubrey. I know. Connor's young. He'll learn. He just needs time. But Connor didn't want to learn. He wanted to prove himself. And he was relentless. He showed up to every board meeting with new slide decks and financial projections that looked impressive to people who'd never actually run a production floor, who'd never had to call a client at 3 a.m. because a machine failed and an entire assembly line was down. Meeting by meeting, I watched Sean's resolve weaken under the pressure of his son's ambition. And 5 weeks ago, everything came to a head. Sean called an emergency leadership meeting on a Tuesday afternoon. He was 62 years old, at least another good decade of work in him, maybe more, but he looked exhausted when he stood at the head of the conference table. Worn down. Defeated in a way I'd never seen before, not even during Marie's worst days with cancer. I'm stepping down as CEO, he announced to the room full of people who'd built this company alongside him. Effective immediately. Connor's ready to take over. It's time for the next generation to take Mitchell Industrial into the future. His eyes never quite met mine during that speech. Connor stood beside his father, already dressed like he owned the place, wearing that confident smile that made my stomach turn. After the meeting ended and everyone filed out making awkward small talk and offering congratulations that didn't quite reach their eyes, I lingered near the door. Sean, I said quietly. He looked up from the papers he was pretending to organize, and for just a moment I saw something raw in his face. Regret maybe. Or just exhaustion so complete it had worn through every defense he'd built over 40 years of running a business. It's done, Aubrey, he said, his voice flat. He's my son. This company is his legacy. I nodded once and walked out, feeling like I'd just watched something important die. That was 5 weeks ago. Yesterday, Connor called me into his office. The same office that used to be Sean's, though Connor had already redecorated with minimalist furniture and motivational posters about innovation, and fired me. And this morning I was sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee and listening to Sean Mitchell realize that his son had just made the most expensive mistake of his short career. Aubrey, Sean's voice was strained, desperate in a way I'd never heard before. Don't do anything yet. Please. Let me fix this. I set my coffee cup down on the kitchen table, watching the steam rise in the morning light. Through my window, I could see my neighbor Mrs. Chin watering her garden like it was any other Tuesday morning. Like the world hadn't shifted overnight. It's already done, Sean, I said quietly. Patricia Vance is handling it. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear him breathing on the other end. Then, barely above a whisper, the golden parachute clause. Yes. Oh God. His voice cracked. He didn't check, did he? Please tell me he at least looked at the contracts before. He didn't. Another long pause. I could almost see Sean in his home office, the one with family photos covering the walls, realizing exactly what his son had done. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. How many of you had protected contracts? I took a slow breath. This was the part that would really hurt. 4 of us. Me, Rachel, Marcus, and Denise. All with the same clause you insisted on 6 years ago. 3 times annual salary for termination without cause. I heard him calculating in real time. My $780,000. Rachel's engineering director salary would be around $690,000. Marcus's $510,000. Denise's $600,000. Nearly $2.5 million in severance penalties that Connor had triggered in a single afternoon. For a company with $8 million in liquid reserves, it was catastrophic. That's not even the worst part, I added, my voice steady. What do you mean? The dread in his question was palpable. Connor terminated all 4 of us without cause and without documentation. No written warnings. No performance improvement plans. No paper trail whatsoever. Patricia's filing an age discrimination suit by end of business today. We have emails, meeting notes, and witness testimony showing systematic termination of employees over 45, all replaced by consultants under 30. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard something slam, a fist on a desk maybe, and Sean's voice distant but clear. "Connor, get back in here. Now." "I have to go," he said to me, his voice tight. "But Aubrey." "Yes. This isn't over. We'll talk again." The line went dead. I sat there for a moment staring at my phone, trying to process what I was feeling. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was something colder, more calculated. I'd spent 16 years building Mitchell Industrial, and in one afternoon Connor had shown me exactly how much that loyalty was worth to him. Now he was going to learn what it cost. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. "Rachel, are you seeing this? Check your email." I opened my laptop, still sitting at the kitchen table in my pajamas, and pulled up my personal email account. Rachel had forwarded an internal memo from Mitchell Industrial, sent just 20 minutes ago. The subject line read, "Organizational restructuring, immediate implementation." I scrolled through it, my coffee going cold beside me. The memo announced the retirement of 4 senior leaders: myself, Rachel, Marcus, and Denise, and the immediate appointment of interim leadership. Every single replacement was under 35. Connor had brought in his business school network. Consultants from a firm in Chicago, none of whom had ever worked in industrial manufacturing. The memo praised our years of dedicated service, while simultaneously suggesting we were obstacles to necessary innovation and competitive modernization. It was corporate speak for, "The old guard is gone, the future starts now." I read it twice, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Then my phone rang again. This time it was Rachel. "Did you read it?" Her voice was shaking. "Did you see what he wrote about us? Like we're dinosaurs who couldn't adapt." "I saw it," I said calmly. "Aubrey, I gave 7 years to that company. I turned down offers from Tesla and SpaceX because you convinced me Mitchell was building something special. And this is how it ends. With a memo that makes us sound like we were holding the company back." I could hear tears in her voice and something inside me hardened. "Rachel, did you keep the email from last month? The one where Connor asked you to sign off on the outsourcing proposal? The one where I explained in detail why it would compromise quality control?" "That's the one. I have it." "Why?" "Forward it to Patricia Vance. Today. Along with any other documentation showing you raised concerns about Connor's proposals and were ignored or overruled." There was a pause. "You're building a case." "We're building a case," I corrected. "All of us. This isn't just about the severance money, Rachel. This is about making sure what he did has consequences." After we hung up, I made myself a fresh cup of coffee and opened my laptop again. I drafted an email to Bernard Whitmore, CEO of Apex Automation Technologies. Bernard and I had crossed paths at industry conferences for years. 6 months ago, he'd approached me with an offer: a significant salary increase and an equity stake if I'd consider leaving Mitchell Industrial. I'd declined out of loyalty to Sean. I'd kept Bernard's business card though. Filed it away in my desk drawer just in case. Now I pulled up his contact information and started typing. "Bernard, I hope this email finds you well. I'm writing to follow up on our conversation from the spring. My circumstances have changed and I'd be interested in discussing the opportunity you mentioned. Would you have time for a call this week? Best regards, Aubrey." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "Aubrey, tell me you got that memo too. Tell me I'm not the only one who thinks this is insane." "You're not the only one," I assured him. "How are you holding up?" "Honestly, I'm furious. I've been with Mitchell for 12 years. Started on the production floor, worked my way up to supervisor. I hired most of the team we have now. And Connor fires me via email at 8 in the morning, then sends out a company-wide memo 2 hours later making it sound like I was the problem." "I know," I said quietly. "But Marcus, I need you to focus. Do you have documentation? Performance reviews, emails showing your work quality, anything that proves you were doing your job well?" "I have everything. I keep copies of all my quarterly reviews." "Why?" "Because we're going to need it. Patricia Vance is building a case, and the more documentation we have showing we were terminated without cause, the stronger our position." "You think we can actually win this?" I thought about Connor sitting in that office yesterday, barely looking at me as he fired me. Thought about the arrogance in his voice, the assumption that he could just sweep away 16 years of my work like it meant nothing. I think we already have, I said. By late afternoon I'd spoken with Denise as well. She'd been the most emotional of all of us, crying through most of our phone call. Mitchell Industrial wasn't just a job for her. It was where she'd rebuilt her life after a difficult divorce 5 years ago. The quality control lab was her kingdom, and Connor had given it to a 29-year-old consultant who'd never worked in manufacturing quality assurance. What am I supposed to do now? She asked, her voice breaking. I'm 51 years old, Aubrey. Who's going to hire me? Someone who values experience, I told her firmly. And Denise, this isn't over. We're going to fight this. All of us together. That evening I sat down with Patricia Vance via video call. She'd spent the day reviewing all 4 of our employment contracts, along with the documentation we'd sent over. This is even better than I thought, she said, adjusting her glasses as she looked at her screen. Connor Mitchell didn't just violate your contracts. He created a textbook case of age discrimination. 4 employees, all over 45, all terminated on the same day without cause, all replaced by consultants under 35. The pattern is undeniable. What happens next? I asked. I file formal severance claims for all 4 of you by end of week. The company has 30 days to respond. Given the contract language, they'll have to pay. It's not negotiable. These golden parachute clauses are airtight. But beyond that, I'm filing a discrimination complaint with the EOC. That investigation will take longer, but it puts additional pressure on Mitchell Industrial. And if they fight it? Patricia smiled. Then we take them to court where discovery will be very interesting. Every email, every meeting note, every decision Connor made in his 5 weeks as CEO becomes part of the public record. Companies usually settle rather than face that kind of exposure. After the call ended, I sat in my quiet living room as darkness fell outside. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Mom, Emma told me what happened. Are you okay? Do you need me to come home? I smiled, typing back. I'm okay, sweetheart. Really. This is just a change, not a catastrophe. Focus on your students. I'll call you this weekend. But sitting there in the darkness, I realized something had shifted inside me. Yesterday, when Connor fired me, I'd felt shock and betrayal. Today I felt something different. Clarity. For 16 years, I'd poured everything into Mitchell Industrial. My time, my expertise, my loyalty. I'd sacrificed weekends and holidays. I'd missed Emma's nursing school graduation because we had a client crisis. I'd postponed vacations because production schedules couldn't wait. And Connor Mitchell had dismissed all of it in 5 words. We don't need you anymore. Fine. He'd learn soon enough exactly what he'd lost. My phone lit up with an email notification. Bernard Whitmore had responded, Aubrey, great to hear from you. I'm available tomorrow at 2 p.m. for a call. Looking forward to catching up. Bernard. I closed my laptop and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. I kept thinking about the production floor at Mitchell Industrial, about the equipment I'd maintained and the systems I'd built and the people I'd trained. I thought about Crawford Automotive's contract renewal coming up in 6 weeks, and how Connor's consultants had no idea how to handle that relationship. I thought about all the institutional knowledge that had walked out the door yesterday, and how long it would take Connor to realize what he'd lost. Somewhere across town, in the house he'd grown up in, Connor Mitchell was probably celebrating his first day as CEO. Probably convinced he'd made the tough decisions necessary to modernize the company. He had no idea what was coming. The next morning I woke at 5:30 out of pure habit. My body didn't care that I no longer had a job to go to. 16 years of early production meetings and client calls had programmed my internal clock, and it refused to adjust just because Connor Mitchell had decided I was obsolete. I made coffee in the pre-dawn darkness, standing at my kitchen counter and watching through the window as the sky gradually shifted from black to deep blue to that pale gray that comes just before sunrise. The neighborhood was silent except for a dog barking somewhere down the street. My phone sat on the counter beside me, screen dark. I'd turned off notifications last night after the flood of texts from former colleagues. Some offering sympathy, others asking what really happened, a few quietly inquiring if I knew of any job openings elsewhere. Word traveled fast in our industry. At exactly 7 o'clock my phone lit up. Sean Mitchell. I stared at his name on the screen through 1 ring. 2. 3. My finger hovered over the answer button, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. Let him sit with the uncertainty the way I'd sat with it yesterday, packing my office into a cardboard box while younger employees pretended not to watch. But on the fourth ring I answered. Aubrey. His voice hit me immediately, ragged, desperate, nothing like the composed businessman I'd worked alongside for 16 years. What happened yesterday? I just found out this morning. Connor didn't tell me he was. He stopped, seeming to choke on whatever words came next. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch between us. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Chin from next door in her bathrobe, bending down to pick up her newspaper. You should ask your son, I said finally, keeping my voice even. I did. There was a heavy pause. He said you were blocking innovation. That you refused to implement his efficiency recommendations and were undermining his authority with the senior team. Something cold and sharp twisted in my chest. So that's how Connor was spinning it. Not that he'd impulsively fired 4 people without checking their contracts, but that we were obstacles to his grand vision. Did he mention that I was fired without warning? I asked, still maintaining that carefully neutral tone. Without documentation? Without cause? Silence. Did he mention that he eliminated the entire senior leadership team in a single day? Ray, Marcus, Denise. Everyone who built this company with you, Sean. Gone by lunchtime. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear Sean's breathing on the other end, ragged and uneven like he'd just finished running a mile. Jesus Christ. His voice cracked. All of them? He fired all of you. All of us, I confirmed. Then I heard it, something slamming in the background. A fist hitting a desk maybe, or a hand slapping against a wall. Sean's voice came through, distant but clear, shouting, Connor. Get in here. Now. There was rustling, movement, maybe a door opening. Then Sean was back on the line, his breathing harsh. Aubrey, listen to me. Don't do anything yet. Please. Just give me 24 hours to fix this. I can reverse the terminations, put everyone back in their positions, make this right. It's already done, Sean. I set my coffee cup down on the counter with a soft click. Patricia Vance is handling it. His exhale was long and shaky, and I could picture him closing his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose the way he did when dealing with particularly bad news from a supplier or client. The golden parachute clause, he said quietly. Oh God, Aubrey, please tell me he at least checked the contracts first. Please tell me he didn't just. He didn't. Another pause, this one filled with the sound of Sean's realization settling in. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. How many of you had protected contracts? I watched a bird land on my back fence, small and brown and utterly unconcerned with the conversation that was about to change everything. 4 of us. Me, Rachel, Marcus, and Denise. All with the same clause you insisted on 6 years ago when Apex tried to poach me. 3 times annual salary for termination without cause. I could almost hear him calculating. My $780,000. Rachel's $690,000. Marcus's $510,000. Denise's $600,000. The numbers adding up in his head, each one another nail in the coffin of his son's brief tenure as CEO. The silence stretched so long I genuinely thought he might have hung up. That's nearly $2.6 million, he finally said, his voice hollow. Yes. For a company with $8 million in liquid reserves, it wasn't just expensive. It was catastrophic. But I wasn't finished. That's not even the worst part, Sean. What do you mean? The dread in his voice was palpable, like he was bracing for another blow. I picked up my coffee cup again, wrapping both hands around it even though it was a warm October morning and I didn't need the heat. Old habits. Connor terminated all 4 of us without cause and without documentation. No written warnings. No performance improvement plans. No email trail showing we were underperforming or refusing to follow directives. Nothing. Just walked us out the door. I paused, letting that sink in. Patricia's filing an age discrimination suit this afternoon. We have emails showing Connor specifically targeted employees over 45. We have meeting notes where he referred to the senior team as legacy deadweight. We have witness testimony from at least 6 current employees who heard him say we needed fresh blood and younger perspectives. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could picture Sean in his home office, the room he'd retreated to after stepping down as CEO, The space filled with photos of Marie and Connor at various ages, industry awards collecting dust on shelves, the desk where he'd built a company from nothing over 4 decades. All of it potentially destroyed because his son couldn't be bothered to read a contract before signing termination papers. When Sean finally spoke, his voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. Not angry. Not desperate. Just cold and flat and done. "I'll call you back." The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, phone in hand, watching the sky continue to brighten outside my window. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me just felt tired. Then I did something I'd been thinking about since yesterday afternoon, when I'd sat in my car with that cardboard box of personal items and realized my entire professional identity had just been packed into a container small enough to fit in a trunk. I scrolled through my contacts and found a name I'd saved 6 months ago but never called. Bernard Whitmore, CEO of Apex Automation Technologies, Mitchell Industrial's biggest competitor. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and unsurprised. "Aubrey Caldwell. I was wondering when you'd reach out." I smiled despite myself. "Still interested in that conversation we had in Detroit? About you joining Apex?" He didn't even hesitate. "Absolutely. When can you start?" 3 months, I said, walking to my kitchen table and sitting down with my coffee. "After my severance clears and my non-compete clause expires." "And your team?" Bernard asked, and I could hear the shift in his tone, from friendly to business. "Rachel, Marcus, Denise. You think they'd come with you?" I thought about the text from last night. About Rachel's message, "I can't believe he did this to us." About Marcus writing, 12 years and I get fired by email." About Denise's simple, "I don't know what to do." People who'd given everything to Mitchell Industrial, only to be dismissed like outdated equipment. "I think they're going to be very motivated to explore new opportunities," I said carefully. Bernard was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear him thinking, calculating what it would mean to bring on Mitchell Industrial's entire senior leadership team. The institutional knowledge alone was worth millions. The client relationships, supplier connections, production expertise. It was everything a competitor would want. "Send me your resume," he said finally. "And if they're interested. We'll set up formal interviews, but between you and me, Aubrey, I've been trying to hire you for 6 months. This is just the excuse I needed." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table as the morning sun finally broke over the horizon, flooding my small kitchen with golden light. I thought about what Connor Mitchell didn't understand about institutional knowledge. It wasn't just about knowing which buttons to push or which vendors to call when a machine broke down. It was about relationships built over years. Trust that couldn't be replicated in a PowerPoint presentation. The unwritten agreements that kept business flowing smoothly even when contracts didn't cover every contingency. It was knowing that Crawford Automotive's purchasing director, Michael Brennan, preferred phone calls to emails because he liked to hear your voice when discussing technical specifications. It was remembering that our main supplier in Detroit had a son with special needs and would always prioritize orders if you called him directly instead of going through the automated system. It was understanding that the machine on production line 3 made a specific clicking sound exactly 48 hours before it needed maintenance. And if you caught it then, you avoided a breakdown that could cost tens of thousands in lost production time. Connor thought he could replace all of that with an MBA from Wharton and confident swagger. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Just got off the phone with Patricia. She says our case is solid. Did you really call Apex?" I typed back, "Yes. Sending you Bernard's contact info now. Call him." 3 dots appeared immediately, showing she was typing. Then, "Are we really doing this?" I looked around my kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd raised 2 daughters alone, where I'd celebrated promotions and cried over setbacks, where I'd rebuilt my life after James died. "Yes," I typed back. "We're really doing this." 2 weeks passed in a strange kind of limbo. I went through the motions of unemployment. Updated my resume, organized my home office, finally cleaned out the garage I'd been meaning to tackle for 3 years. But mostly I waited. Waited for Patricia to file the paperwork. Waited for my severance check to clear. Waited for the 3-month non-compete clock to start ticking down. And I watched. Denise had maintained friendships with several people still working at Mitchell Industrial. The kind of relationships that survive corporate upheaval because they're built on genuine connection rather than professional convenience. Sarah from accounting. Tim from the production floor. Jennifer, who'd been Denise's assistant in the quality control lab for 5 years. They started sending her information. Not because she asked for it, but because they were scared and confused and needed someone to tell them what was happening to their company. On a Wednesday afternoon, I was meeting with Patricia in her downtown office when my phone buzzed. Denise's name appeared with a text. "You need to see this." 3 photo attachments loaded slowly on my screen. Patricia set down the contract she'd been reviewing and leaned over my shoulder as I enlarged the first image. It was an internal memo dated 2 days ago, marked confidential, management only. The subject line read, "Production status update, urgent." I read through it twice, my coffee going cold on Patricia's desk beside me. Crawford Automotive's latest order, precision hydraulic components for their new assembly line in Kentucky, was 3 weeks behind schedule. 3 weeks. The memo blamed transition challenges and legacy system inefficiencies, which was corporate speak for, "Nobody here knows what they're doing anymore." The second photo was worse. A quality control report showing that a shipment to Detroit had failed inspection. Defective components. An entire batch that had to be recalled and replaced, costing Mitchell Industrial not just money but reputation. In our industry, quality control failures were death sentences. Automotive plants couldn't afford downtime because a supplier shipped faulty parts. The third photo made my stomach tighten. It was an email chain between Connor and 2 of his consultant friends, discussing how to handle Crawford Automotive's contract renewal. The purchasing director, Michael Brennan, had apparently requested a meeting to discuss concerns about recent quality issues and delivery delays. Connor's response, visible in the email thread: "Set up the meeting. We'll smooth this over with better pricing. Everyone responds to discounts." I looked up at Patricia, who was reading over my shoulder with her reading glasses perched on her nose. "He has no idea," I said quietly. "No idea about what?" "Crawford doesn't care about pricing. They pay premium rates because they need guaranteed quality and delivery. Michael Brennan will walk away from a relationship over reliability concerns, even if Connor offers him components at cost." Patricia sat back in her chair, fingers steepled under her chin. "This is excellent for our case. It shows immediate operational damage directly resulting from the terminations. The company's already struggling without the institutional knowledge you four provided." He paused, studying my face. "How does that make you feel?" It was the kind of question a therapist might ask, and I appreciated that Patricia understood this was about more than just legal strategy. "Honestly." I set my phone down on her desk. "I don't know yet." That evening I met Rachel, Marcus, and Denise at Rossi's, a quiet Italian restaurant on the edge of town. The kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, where the lighting was dim enough that conversations stayed private. Rachel arrived first and I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, her face drawn in a way that made her look older than her 47 years. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the menu. "How are you?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. "I'm going crazy," she said bluntly. "Sitting at home sending out resumes that go nowhere because I'm overqualified, or because companies see MIT on my resume and assume I'm too expensive. I need to work, Aubrey. I need to feel like I matter again." Marcus arrived 10 minutes later, still wearing work boots caked with dried mud. He slid into the booth with a heavy sigh. "Where have you been?" Denise asked, arriving last with a bottle of red wine she'd apparently brought from home. "Helping my brother-in-law with his landscaping business," Marcus said, accepting the wine glass Denise poured for him. "Digging ditches and laying sod. At 53 years old. My wife keeps asking when I'm going to find a real job again, and I don't know what to tell her." The server came by to take our orders and we made small talk until he left. Then the conversation turned serious. "I can't do this anymore," Rachel said, her voice low but intense. "Watch from the sidelines while Connor destroys everything we built. I need to work. I need to matter." I looked at each of them, people I'd worked alongside for years, people I'd hired and promoted and trusted. People who'd given everything to Mitchell Industrial and been discarded like they were nothing. I took a breath and made the decision I'd been wrestling with for 2 weeks. "I've accepted a position with Apex Automation," I said quietly. "Chief Operating Officer. Equity stake. Full authority to build my own team." The silence that followed was electric. Denise's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Rachel leaned forward, eyes suddenly sharp and focused. Marcus's expression shifted from exhausted resignation to something that looked almost like hope. Bernard Whitmore called me last week, I continued, keeping my voice low even though the nearest occupied table was 20 feet away. He knows what happened at Mitchell. He knows Connor's driving the company into the ground. And he's made offers for all of us, if you're interested. What kind of offers? Marcus asked immediately. Competitive salaries. Benefits. For you, Marcus, production management with a team of 20. Rachel, you'd head the engineering division with full R&D budget. Denise, you'd establish quality control protocols from the ground up. I paused, watching their faces carefully. But there's a catch. We all have 3-month non-compete clauses. We can't start until those expire. Bernard's willing to wait, but we'd need to commit now. Rachel spoke first, her voice steady for the first time since she'd arrived. What about the non-compete terms? Can we legally do this? Patricia reviewed all our contracts, I assured her. As long as we're not actively poaching Mitchell's current clients or stealing proprietary information, we're clear. We can work for a competitor. We can bring our expertise and relationships. We just can't deliberately sabotage Mitchell or breach confidentiality agreements. Marcus leaned back and a slow smile spread across his weathered face. So in 3 months, we walk into Apex and start competing directly with Mitchell Industrial. That's the idea, I confirmed. Denise raised her wine glass, her hand no longer shaking. To new beginnings. We clinked glasses in that dim restaurant booth and I felt something shift deep in my chest. Not quite revenge. That word felt too sharp, too deliberately destructive. But justice maybe. Or simply the satisfaction of knowing that the people who'd been thrown away were about to prove their value in a way Connor Mitchell would never forget. The conversation turned practical after that. Timeline discussions. Salary negotiations. Questions about Apex's company culture and Bernard's management style. Rachel wanted to know about R&D budgets. Marcus asked about production capacity and equipment quality. Denise inquired about quality control standards and testing protocols. We ordered food we barely touched and drank wine that went down easier than it should have. For the first time in 2 weeks, I saw hope returning to their faces. Purpose. Direction. But later that night, lying in bed in the darkness of my quiet house, I couldn't silence the small voice in my head asking uncomfortable questions. Was I doing the right thing? Or was I letting anger and hurt cloud my judgment? Thought about Sean. Not Connor but Sean. The man who'd given me a chance when I was drowning in grief. Who'd helped me afford Sophie's college education. Who'd trusted me to help build something meaningful. Was I betraying him by joining his biggest competitor? Or had he betrayed me first by handing control to Connor without protecting the people who'd made his success possible? I picked up my phone from my nightstand, the screen's glow harsh in the darkness. I scrolled through old photos stored in my cloud. Pictures from company events spanning 16 years. A Christmas party from 2015, Sean and Marie smiling beside a decorated tree, me in the background talking to clients. The day we'd landed the Crawford contract, the whole team celebrating in the conference room with cheap champagne and genuine joy. Sean's retirement party 5 weeks ago, where he'd given a speech thanking everyone for their dedication, his hand on Connor's shoulder as he introduced the future of Mitchell Industrial. In one photo, Connor stood beside his father, 26 years old and beaming with confidence. So sure of himself. So certain that inheriting a company meant he'd earned the right to run it. I wondered if he'd ever really fought for anything. If he'd ever faced consequences that couldn't be fixed with his father's money or connections. My phone buzzed, startling me in the darkness. A text from Sophie. Mom just wanted to check in. Emma said you seemed stressed on the phone yesterday. Are you really okay? I stared at the message for a long moment, my daughter's concern reaching across the miles from Chicago to my quiet bedroom in Columbus. I typed back, I'm figuring it out, sweetheart. Don't worry about me. Focus on your students. But after I sent it, I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling and wondering if the path I'd chosen would lead to satisfaction or simply turn me into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who'd spent 16 years building something only to spend the next year tearing it down. The questions didn't go away. They followed me through the next week like shadows, present even when I tried to focus on other things. I threw myself into preparation for Apex, studying their product lines, reviewing their client portfolio, learning the differences between their systems and what I'd worked with at Mitchell Industrial. But late at night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I kept coming back to the same uncomfortable truth. Part of me was enjoying watching Mitchell Industrial struggle. And I wasn't sure what that said about who I was becoming. 3 weeks after Connor fired me, my phone rang at 7 in the evening. I was in my home office, surrounded by technical specifications for Apex's new automation line, making notes in the margins about potential improvements. Getting myself up to speed before my official start date in 2 months. The work felt good, purposeful, engaging, a reminder that I was still capable and valuable. When Sean's name appeared on my screen, I almost didn't answer. I'd been avoiding his calls since our last conversation, letting them go to voicemail and listening to his increasingly desperate messages but never calling back. Each message was a variation on the same theme. Please talk to me. We need to fix this. Connor doesn't understand what he's done. But something made me answer this time. Maybe curiosity. Maybe guilt. Maybe just the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from carrying anger for too long. Aubrey. His voice hit me immediately, raw, stripped of every bit of confidence I'd always associated with him. I need your help. I set down my pen carefully, my heart suddenly beating faster. I don't work for Mitchell Industrial anymore, Sean. Your son made that very clear. I know. I know. There was a long pause filled with the sound of him breathing, struggling with something. The board is meeting tomorrow morning. They want to discuss removing Connor from leadership. I said nothing, waiting. But the damage is already done, Aubrey. We're hemorrhaging contracts. Suppliers are walking. Our reputation is in free fall. His voice cracked. We lost the Detroit account this morning. They cited quality concerns and delivery delays. That's $1.2 million annually just gone. I closed my eyes, picturing the Detroit account, one I'd personally managed for 8 years, built from a small trial order into one of our most reliable revenue streams. Connor had destroyed it in 3 weeks. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me just felt sad. What exactly are you asking me, Sean? Could you come back? The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them in and couldn't contain them anymore. Name your terms. Equity stake, board seat, salary, whatever you want. Just come back and help me save this company before Connor destroys it completely. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at my quiet street. It was early November now, and neighbors were already putting up Christmas lights even though Thanksgiving was still 2 weeks away. Mrs. Chin across the street was wrapping garland around her porch railing. The Johnsons next door had inflatable snowmen on their lawn. Normal people living normal lives, not navigating corporate warfare and moral ambiguity. I can't, Sean, I said quietly. I've already accepted another position. The silence that followed was heavy with all the questions he wasn't asking. With who? He finally said, though something in his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I could have told him everything right then. Could have twisted the knife and explained that I was joining Apex, that Rachel and Marcus and Denise were coming with me, that we'd be competing directly for every contract Mitchell Industrial still held. That Crawford Automotive's purchasing director had already reached out to Bernard about a meeting. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of all those years we'd worked side by side. Maybe it was the way his voice broke when he talked about his company falling apart. Maybe I was just too tired for cruelty. Someone who values experience, I said simply. Sean was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. I failed you, Aubrey. I should have protected you. Should have protected all of you. He paused and I could hear him struggling with the words. I knew Connor wasn't ready. God, I knew. But he's my son. How do you tell your own child they're not good enough? How do you look at them and say, I don't trust you with the thing I spent my entire life building? His words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time I understood that Sean hadn't been weak or cowardly. He'd been trapped, caught between his legacy and his love for his son, unable to see a path that honored both. Unwilling to choose between the company he'd built and the child he'd raised. It didn't excuse what had happened. But it explained it in a way that made him human again instead of just another person who'd let me down. You gave me the tools to protect myself, I said, surprising myself with how gentle my voice sounded. That golden parachute clause, that contract you insisted on 6 years ago, it gave me options. leverage, the ability to walk away with dignity. And to build something even better, Sean said quietly. Yes, I agreed. And to build something even better. After we hung up, I stood at that window for a long time, watching the neighborhood lights flicker on one by one as darkness settled over Columbus. The temperature had dropped and I could see my breath fogging the glass. My phone buzzed with a text from Bernard Whitmore. Crawford Automotive's purchasing director wants to meet next week. Michael Brennan specifically asked if you'd be there. Are you interested? I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. This was it. The moment where I would cross a line from defensive strategy to active offense. Crawford Automotive was Mitchell Industrial's largest client. $4.5 million in annual revenue, contracts stretching back almost a decade. Their renewal was coming up in less than 4 weeks. If I met with Michael Brennan, if I pitched Apex's capabilities and highlighted Mitchell's recent quality failures and delivery delays, I wouldn't just be competing with my old company. I'd be actively working to destroy it. The company I'd spent 16 years building. The place where I'd poured my grief after James died and found purpose again. The team I'd assembled, the systems I'd created, the reputation I'd established. All of it about to become collateral damage in a war Connor Mitchell had started but couldn't finish. I looked at the anniversary clock on my bookshelf, the one Sean had given me when I made CO. Even in the dim light of my office I could make out the inscription. To Aubrey, the heart of Mitchell Industrial. With gratitude, Sean Mitchell. Was I still the heart of Mitchell Industrial? Or had that person died the moment Connor said, "We don't need people like you anymore"? I typed back to Bernard, "Set it up. I'll be there." Then I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up everything I knew about Crawford Automotive's operations, their pain points, their requirements. I started building the presentation that would win their business, highlighting Apex's quality control protocols, our delivery guarantees, the expertise of our team. The expertise that used to belong to Mitchell Industrial until Connor threw it away. I worked until after midnight, my coffee going cold beside me, my eyes burning from staring at the screen. When I finally closed my laptop, I felt hollowed out. Not satisfied. Not victorious. Just empty. At 2 a.m, I found myself in my kitchen again, unable to sleep. I made chamomile tea I wouldn't drink, just needing something to do with my hands. The anniversary clock sat on the counter where I'd brought it from my office, its brass plate catching the overhead light. I traced the inscription with my finger, remembering the day Sean had presented it to me in front of the entire company. How proud I'd felt. How valued. Was I throwing all of that away for revenge? Or was I just refusing to be a victim? My phone lit up on the counter. A text from Emma sent hours ago that I'd somehow missed. "Mom, I know you're going through a lot. Just remember, you don't owe loyalty to people who didn't value you. Love you." I read it 3 times, then typed back even though it was the middle of the night. "Thank you, sweetheart. I love you too." At 7 a.m, still in my pajamas with dark circles under my eyes from another sleepless night, Emma called. She must have seen that I'd responded to her text at 2 a.m. and gotten worried. "Mom, you sound exhausted. What's going on?" I told her everything. About Sean's call asking me to come back. About Bernard's text regarding Crawford Automotive. About the presentation I'd spent half the night preparing. About how I wasn't sure anymore if I was doing the right thing or just becoming someone I didn't recognize. When I finished, Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want my honest opinion?" she finally asked. "Always." "You're not being vindictive, Mom. You're being smart." Her voice was firm, certain in a way I didn't feel. "Connor made a choice when he fired you. He made a choice when he fired Rachel and Marcus and Denise. And now he gets to live with the consequences of those choices. That's not revenge, that's just reality." Her words settled something in me that had been churning since Sean's call. Maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't destroying Mitchell Industrial out of spite or anger. Maybe I was just building something new because that's what I did. I built things. I made them work. I created value. And if that meant competing with my old company, taking their clients, proving that Connor Mitchell had made a catastrophic mistake, well, that wasn't revenge. That was just business. The meeting with Crawford Automotive's purchasing director happened on a Tuesday morning in mid-November. I drove to Akron with Rachel, both of us dressed in our best professional attire, blazers and dress pants, leather portfolios containing presentation materials we'd spent the weekend perfecting. The drive took just under 2 hours and we spent most of it in silence, both of us processing what we were about to do. "Are you nervous?" Rachel asked as we pulled into the parking lot of Romano's Steakhouse, the upscale restaurant where Michael Brennan had suggested we meet. "No," I said, turning off the engine. "Are you?" "Terrified," she admitted. "But also, excited? Is that wrong? To be excited about taking down the company we used to work for?" I looked at her. This brilliant engineer who'd turned down offers from Tesla and SpaceX because I'd convinced her Mitchell Industrial was special. Who'd been fired via email and replaced by a consultant half her age. "I don't think it's wrong," I said quietly. "I think it's human." Michael Brennan was already seated when we arrived, tucked into a corner booth with good lighting and enough privacy for a sensitive business conversation. He was in his mid-50s with gray temples and wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of weathered expression that came from decades of dealing with suppliers who overpromised and underdelivered. "Aubrey," he said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, assessing. "I was surprised when Bernard mentioned you'd left Mitchell. More surprised when he said you're with Apex now." "Changes happen," I said simply, sliding into the booth across from him. Rachel sat beside me, already pulling out her tablet. Michael studied me for a moment and I could see him doing the mental calculation, trying to figure out if this was a voluntary move or something else. Trying to decide if I was someone he could trust or just another salesperson looking to make a commission. "Let's not waste time on small talk," I said, deciding to meet his directness with my own. "Mitchell Industrial is struggling right now. I imagine you've noticed the quality control issues on your last shipment." Michael's expression tightened and I knew I'd guessed right. 3 days of production delays while we waited for replacement components, he confirmed. Cost us nearly $200,000 in lost productivity. Not to mention the embarrassment of explaining to our customers why their orders were delayed. Rachel leaned forward, pulling up technical specifications on her tablet. "At Apex, we've implemented a redundancy protocol specifically to prevent those kinds of failures. Dual-source manufacturing for critical components, real-time quality monitoring with AI-assisted defect detection, and guaranteed replacement within 48 hours if anything doesn't meet specifications." She walked him through the details with the precision that had made her invaluable at Mitchell Industrial, explaining tolerances and testing protocols and quality gates in language that was technical enough to be credible but clear enough to understand. I watched Michael's face as she spoke. Watched the way his expression shifted from skeptical to interested to genuinely engaged. This was a man who'd been burned by Mitchell's recent failures and was hungry for reliability. "Your contract with Mitchell is up for renewal in 3 weeks, I said quietly when Rachel finished. "I know because I wrote the original terms 6 years ago. I also know that Connor Mitchell has never managed a client account before. He's never dealt with the kind of precision requirements your assembly lines demand." Michael set down his water glass carefully. "You're asking me to walk away from a relationship that's lasted 8 years. That's not a decision I make lightly, Aubrey. Even with recent problems." "I'm not asking you to walk away from a relationship," I corrected, meeting his eyes. "I'm asking you to prioritize your production schedule over loyalty to a company that's no longer capable of delivering what you need. Mitchell Industrial is hemorrhaging talent and cutting corners to compensate. What happened with your last shipment? That's not an anomaly. That's the new normal." The silence that followed was heavy with decision. Michael pushed his glasses up on his nose, a gesture I'd seen him make hundreds of times during technical discussions over the years. He was thinking, weighing risks, calculating cost. "Send me a formal proposal," he finally said. "Detailed pricing, delivery schedules, quality guarantees. I'll present it to our procurement team next week." It wasn't a commitment, but it was an opening. As Rachel and I walked back to the car, I felt something settle in my chest. Not quite triumph, but close to it. We'd just taken the first real step in pulling Mitchell Industrial's foundation out from under them. But instead of satisfaction, I felt hollow. Like I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. "That went well," Rachel said, buckling her seatbelt as I started the car. "Yeah," I agreed, my voice flat. She looked at me, concern creasing her forehead. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Ask me in a few months." 2 days later, Denise forwarded me another internal memo from Mitchell Industrial. I was having lunch at my kitchen table. Leftover pasta I'd reheated but wasn't really eating, when my phone buzzed. The memo was marked confidential, but Denise's contact had photographed it anyway and sent it to her. I read it twice, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. The memo detailed emergency cost-cutting measures. 12 more employees were being laid off, mostly from production and quality control. Equipment maintenance was being delayed to preserve cash flow. Most damaging, Mitchell was switching to cheaper component suppliers to reduce costs. Connor was panicking, trying to stop the bleeding by making cuts that would only accelerate the company's decline. Every decision was exactly wrong, made by someone who understood spreadsheets but not manufacturing. You can't delay equipment maintenance without risking breakdowns. You can't cut quality control staff without risking defects. You can't switch to cheaper suppliers without risking inconsistent component quality. But Connor was doing all three at once. That evening Marcus called. His voice was tight with anger. "Did you see Denise's email?" "I saw it," I confirmed, standing at my kitchen window and watching the sun set over my neighbor's roof. "He's going to kill that company," Marcus said. "Every single decision he's making is exactly wrong. And you know what the worst part is? The people still working there, good people we hired and trained, they're the ones who'll suffer when it all collapses." I thought about Tim from the production floor who just bought his first house. About Sarah in accounting who was supporting her elderly mother. About Jennifer, Denise's former assistant, who'd confided in me once that this job had saved her life after her divorce. "We can't save everyone," I said quietly. "I know." Marcus sighed heavily. "But it doesn't make it easier to watch. Once our non-competes expire, we can offer positions to the best people," I said. "It's not much, but it's something." It was a rationalization and we both knew it. We were offering lifeboats while simultaneously drilling holes in the ship. But Marcus accepted it with another heavy sigh, and we ended the call without saying what we were both thinking, that there was blood on our hands too. 3 weeks after my meeting with Michael Brennan, the announcement came through. I was in Bernard's office at Apex headquarters, reviewing production schedules for a different client, when his assistant knocked on the door. "Crawford Automotive just called," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "They're declining to renew with Mitchell Industrial. They want to move their entire account to us." The room went silent. Bernard looked at me and I looked back, and for a moment neither of us said anything. Then he stood up and hugged me, a brief, professional embrace that still felt surreal. "This is huge, Aubrey," he said, stepping back with his hands on my shoulders. "Crawford's a $4.5 million annual account. You just paid for your entire salary for the next 3 years. We need to make sure we can actually deliver," I said, but my voice sounded distant to my own ears. "We will. With you and Rachel and the team we're building, we'll deliver better than Mitchell ever did." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of logistics discussions and capacity planning. By the time I drove home, it was after 7 and full dark outside. I sat in my quiet kitchen with a glass of wine I'd poured but didn't really want, staring at nothing. We'd done it. We'd taken Mitchell Industrial's largest client, their most important relationship, the contract that represented nearly a third of their annual revenue. I should have felt victorious, vindicated, satisfied. Instead, I just felt hollow. My phone rang. Sean's name on the screen. I stared at it through 1 ring, 2, 3, 4. Let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later it rang again. This time I answered. "I know about Crawford," Sean said. His voice was flat, empty of everything except exhaustion. No greeting. No preamble. Just those 4 words. "Sean. I'm not calling to argue," he cut me off. "I'm calling to tell you that the board voted tonight. Connor's out. I'm back as CEO, at least temporarily, while we figure out how to stop the bleeding." I closed my eyes, gripping my wine glass so hard I was surprised it didn't shatter. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said, and meant it. "Are you?" His voice was sharp now, bitter in a way I'd never heard before. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're systematically destroying everything we built together." The words hit like a physical blow. "That's not fair," I said quietly. "Isn't it?" Sean's voice cracked. "You took our largest client, Aubrey. You knew exactly how much that contract meant to the company. You knew it would cripple us. And you did it anyway. Connor fired me," I said, my own voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. He fired Rachel and Marcus and Denise. He destroyed our careers without a second thought. What did you expect us to do? Just disappear quietly? I expected you to be better than this, Sean said. I expected you to be the person I trusted for 16 years. The person who built things instead of tearing them down. The silence that followed was brutal. I am building something, I finally said. Just not for you anymore. Sean didn't respond for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, defeated. I hope it's worth it, Aubrey. I hope whatever you're building is worth watching everything else burn. The line went dead. I sat there in my dark kitchen, phone in hand, wine untouched, and tried to figure out if he was right. I didn't sleep that night. Sean's words kept echoing in my head. I hope whatever you're building is worth watching everything else burn. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows shift as car headlights passed outside my window, and tried to convince myself that I was doing the right thing. That Connor had started this. That I was just protecting myself and my team. That business was business. But the words felt hollow even in my own mind. The next afternoon I was in my home office working on a proposal for another potential Apex client. A mid-sized manufacturer in Pittsburgh that had been using Mitchell Industrial for years, when my doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer it. I was tired, emotionally drained, not in the mood for whatever neighbor was collecting signatures or selling something. But something made me walk to the front door and look through the window. Sean's car was in my driveway. The same silver sedan he'd been driving for 10 years because he'd never been the flashy type, never cared about status symbols or showing off wealth. I opened the door to find him standing on my porch, and I barely recognized him. He looked older than I remembered, older than he'd looked just weeks ago when I'd last seen him. Exhaustion was carved into every line of his face. His shoulders slumped in a way that made him seem smaller somehow. His hair, always neatly combed, was disheveled. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Can we talk?" he asked, and something in his voice, something broken and desperate, made it impossible to refuse. I led him into my living room without saying anything. The same room where he'd sat 5 years ago after Marie's funeral, accepting casseroles from my daughters and trying not to break down while talking about how much he'd loved his wife. The same couch where we'd celebrated when we'd landed the Crawford contract, toasting with cheap champagne because neither of us cared about expensive things. Now we sat across from each other in the afternoon light slanting through the windows, and the silence between us felt like an open wound. "You took Crawford," he finally said. Not an accusation. Just a statement of fact, heavy with meaning. "I offered them better terms and more reliable service," I replied, keeping my voice even. "That's business, Sean. You taught me that." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles were white. "Is this about revenge?" he asked quietly. "About making me pay for what Connor did?" The question hung in the air between us, and I realized I didn't have a simple answer. Maybe I'd convinced myself this was just business, just survival, just protecting my future. But sitting here looking at Sean's broken expression, I couldn't pretend it was that clean. "It's about survival," I said finally. "Connor destroyed my career. My reputation. My sense of security and value. He did the same thing to Rachel, Marcus, Denise. People who gave everything to Mitchell Industrial. What did you expect us to do? Just disappear quietly and pretend 16 years didn't matter?" Sean's jaw tightened and I saw anger flash across his face. "I expected you to give me a chance to fix it," he said, his voice rising. "I called you the morning after. I asked you to come back. I offered you everything, equity, board seat, whatever you wanted. But you'd already made your decision, hadn't you? You'd already decided to gut my company from the inside out." The anger in his voice sparked something in me that I'd been holding back for weeks. Something hot and raw that I'd been trying to keep buried under professionalism and strategic thinking. "Your company?" I stood up, my voice rising despite every intention to stay calm. "I spent 16 years building Mitchell Industrial. I was there at midnight when shipments needed to go out. I was there on weekends fixing problems that Connor wouldn't even understand existed. I hired half the people working there. I established the relationships that kept business flowing. I created the systems that made everything work." My hands were shaking now, all the anger and hurt I'd been suppressing finally breaking through. "And your son dismissed me like I was nothing. Like 16 years of loyalty and expertise meant nothing because I was over 50 and didn't fit his vision of innovation. Like I was outdated equipment to be replaced with a newer model. Sean stood too, his face flushed red. You think I don't know what Connor did wrong? His voice cracked. You think I don't regret handing him control? You think I don't lie awake every night wishing I'd done things differently? He ran his hands through his hair, making it stand up even more wildly. He's my son, Aubrey. My only child. I wanted to believe he was ready because the alternative was admitting I'd failed him as a father. That I'd raised someone who didn't understand the value of the people who built everything he inherited. The rawness in his voice stopped me cold. We stood there in my living room, two people who'd built something meaningful together over 16 years, now facing each other across a divide that felt unbridgeable. So what now? I asked, my voice quieter. You came here to ask me to stop? To let Mitchell Industrial recover so Connor can learn from his mistakes. Sean's shoulders sagged, all the anger draining out of him as quickly as it had appeared. I came here to ask you why, he said, sinking back onto the couch like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. Why you're doing this? If it's about money, I can match Apex's offer. Double it even. If it's about respect, I'll make you a partner. Give you everything you should have had from the beginning. Just tell me what it takes to stop you from destroying what we built. I looked at this man who'd given me a chance when I was desperate and drowning in grief. Who'd helped me afford Sophie's college education. Who'd supported me through the hardest years of my life. Who'd been as close to a mentor and friend as anyone I'd had in my professional life. And I felt something crack inside me, not my resolve but something deeper. Something that hurt in a way that had nothing to do with anger or revenge. You can't fix this, Sean, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Because it's not about money or titles or partnership agreements. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. It's about the fact that when your son fired me, when he fired all of us, you didn't stop him. You knew about the golden parachute clauses. You wrote them yourself specifically to protect against this exact situation. But you handed Connor control anyway without protecting the people who made your success possible. Sean opened his mouth to respond, but I kept going. You chose him over us. Over everything we built together. And now you're asking me to sacrifice my future, my team's future, to save his legacy? To let Mitchell Industrial recover so he can learn lessons that should have been taught years ago. Sean's face crumpled, and for a moment I thought he might actually break down completely. What do you want me to say, Aubrey? His voice was broken, defeated. That I should have chosen you over my own son? That I should have told him, no, you're not ready, you'll never be ready? I wanted you to choose integrity, I said. I wanted you to tell Connor the truth, that he wasn't ready, that he needed to earn leadership instead of inheriting it, that firing experienced people wasn't innovation, it was arrogance and stupidity. I stood up again, pacing to the window. But you didn't. You let him make decisions that destroyed careers and damaged a company you spent 40 years building. You let him throw away institutional knowledge like it was garbage. And now you want me to fix it? To sacrifice everything I've built at Apex to save Connor from the consequences of his own actions. We stood in silence as the afternoon light faded into evening shadows. The room grew darker around us, but neither of us moved to turn on a lamp. Finally, Sean spoke, his voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I can't stop you. I know that now. He stood up slowly like an old man, though he was only 62. But I need to know. When Mitchell Industrial finally collapses, when all those people lose their jobs because the company couldn't recover, will you be able to live with yourself? The question hit me like a physical blow because I'd been asking myself the same thing every night since I'd joined Apex. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces. Tim from the production floor. Sarah from accounting. Jennifer, who'd worked in Denise's quality control lab. Good people whose only mistake was working for a company with terrible leadership. I don't know, I admitted, my voice raw with honesty. But I know I can't sacrifice my future to protect Connor from the consequences of his own actions. That's not revenge, Sean. That's just refusing to be a victim twice. Sean nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer but hoped for something different. He walked toward the door, moving carefully, and I followed him. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, he said. For all of it. For not protecting you. For choosing wrong. For everything. Then he was gone, walking slowly to his car in the gathering darkness. I closed the door and stood there in my entryway listening to his car start and pull away. Then I walked back to my living room, sat down on the couch in the growing darkness and cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears of someone who's sad, but great, heaving sobs that felt like they were tearing something essential out of me. The kind of crying I hadn't done since James died, when grief had overwhelmed everything else. I cried for the company we'd built together. For the relationship that had sustained me through the hardest years of my life. For the version of myself who'd believed that loyalty and hard work mattered more than politics and family connections. I cried until I had nothing left, until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen and my chest ached from the effort. And when I finally stopped, sitting there in my dark living room with mascara probably streaked down my face, I realized something. I couldn't go back. Even if I wanted to, even if Sean offered me everything he'd promised, I couldn't return to Mitchell Industrial. That door had closed the moment Connor said, "We don't need people like you anymore." All I could do was move forward and hope that what I was building at Apex would somehow make all of this worth it. I eventually got up from that couch, washed my face and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easy, and when it did, it was restless and filled with dreams I couldn't quite remember when I woke up. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. My non-compete clause officially expired and I started at Apex full-time. Rachel, Marcus, and Denise joined within days of each other, and we threw ourselves into building something new. Felt good to work again. To have purpose and direction. To be surrounded by people who valued what I brought to the table instead of seeing me as an obstacle to be removed. But I couldn't quite shake the hollow feeling that had settled in my chest since Sean's visit. 3 months after Connor was removed from leadership at Mitchell Industrial, I stood on the observation platform overlooking Apex Automation's production floor. Bernard had renovated this converted warehouse on the east side of Columbus with state-of-the-art equipment. CNC machines that gleamed under industrial lighting, robotic assembly arms that moved with precision, quality control stations staffed by people who actually understood what they were testing. The floor hummed with efficient activity, and I felt a surge of pride watching it all work. Rachel's engineering division occupied the entire second floor. Open workspace filled with computers and prototyping equipment, whiteboards covered in technical drawings that were already generating buzz in industry publications. Marcus ran production with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made him invaluable at Mitchell, but now he had the authority and resources to implement systems he'd only dreamed about before. Denise had established quality control protocols that were quickly becoming the new industry standard. Rigorous testing procedures that caught defects before they ever reached clients. We'd signed 4 major clients in 3 months. Crawford Automotive was just the beginning. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A news alert. Mitchell Industrial Solutions announces financial restructuring amid continued leadership challenges. I clicked through to read the full article, leaning against the railing of the observation platform. The company had laid off 40% of its workforce. Good people I'd known and trained, now scrambling to find new positions in a competitive job market. 2 more major clients had walked away, citing quality concerns and delivery failures. Industry analysts were openly questioning whether Mitchell Industrial could survive the year. Sean had returned as CEO, the article noted, but the damage was too extensive for one person to fix. The company was bringing in outside consultants, selling off non-essential assets, desperately trying to stabilize before complete collapse. And Connor? The article mentioned that he'd enrolled in an executive leadership program at Northwestern and was pursuing opportunities in consulting. I should have felt vindicated. Satisfied. This was exactly what I'd wanted, wasn't it? For Connor to face consequences for his arrogance and stupidity? I just felt tired. Good news. Bernard appeared beside me, 2 coffee mugs in hand. He passed one to me, black, 2 sugars, exactly how I took it. He'd learned that in our first week working together. Mitchell Industrial is restructuring, I said, showing him my phone. Laying off 40% of their workforce. Bernard scanned the article, his expression neutral. That's unfortunate for the people who still work there. But not unexpected given Connor's decisions. No, I agreed. Not unexpected. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the production floor below. A team was assembling components for a client in Tennessee. Precision work that required steady hands and years of experience. Do you regret it? Bernard asked quietly. Taking Crawford? Building this team? Any of it? I thought about the question carefully. Did I regret it? No, I said finally. But that doesn't mean it feels good. Bernard nodded, understanding in a way that only someone who'd run a business for decades could. Building something new always requires letting go of something old. That doesn't make the letting go easy. That evening, as I was shutting down my computer and preparing to head home, my phone rang. Sean's number. I'd been avoiding his calls since our confrontation, letting them go to voicemail, deleting the messages without listening. But something made me answer this time. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe curiosity. Maybe just the need for closure. I saw the announcement about your fourth client, Sean said without preamble. His voice was quiet, stripped of everything except simple acknowledgement. Congratulations, Aubrey. You've built something impressive in a very short time. Thank you, I replied, genuinely unsure where this conversation was going. I also wanted to tell you. He paused and I could hear him struggling with the words. I'm stepping down. Permanently this time. The board's bringing in outside management to oversee the restructuring. Mitchell Industrial will survive, barely, but it won't be the company we built. It'll be something smaller, leaner, more focused on basic manufacturing rather than precision work. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of that reality settle over me. I'm sorry, Sean, I said and meant it. Are you? He asked, echoing his bitter question from weeks ago. But this time there was no anger in his voice. Just bone-deep exhaustion and something that might have been acceptance. I am, I said honestly. I never wanted to destroy Mitchell Industrial. I just wanted to survive what Connor did to me. To us. Sean was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Did I ever tell you why I put that golden parachute clause in your contract? The real reason. You said it was to protect against competitors poaching me. That was part of it, he admitted. But the real reason was insurance. I knew someday I'd have to step back. Health, retirement, whatever. And I wanted to make sure that whoever came after me would think twice before making stupid decisions about the people who made this company work. A sad laugh. I wanted to protect you from exactly what Connor did. I just never imagined my own son would be the threat. It worked, I said softly. Just not the way you planned. No, Sean agreed. Not the way I planned at all. Another pause, this one more comfortable. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, he said. I should have protected you better. Should have protected all of you. Should have told Connor no when he wanted control. Should have been honest about his readiness instead of hoping he'd grow into the role. You gave me the tools to protect myself, I told him and realized I meant it. That contract, that golden parachute clause, it gave me options. Leverage. The ability to walk away with dignity instead of just being discarded. And to build something even better, Sean said quietly. Yes, I agreed. And to build something even better. We sat in silence for a moment. Two people who'd built something meaningful together and watched it nearly collapse, now standing on opposite sides of an industry rivalry that would probably last for years. Take care of yourself, Aubrey. You too, Sean. After I hung up, I stood at my office window for a long time, looking out over Columbus as the sun set and city lights began to flicker on one by one. Then I walked out to the observation platform one more time. The production floor was winding down for the day, second shift coming in, first shift heading home. I watched Marcus doing a final walkthrough, checking equipment, talking to team leads about tomorrow's schedule. Denise was in her lab, finishing up testing on components that would ship out first thing in the morning. Rachel's team was still upstairs, probably working late on a design problem they couldn't quite solve. Bernard appeared beside me again, this time without coffee. Just standing there, hands in his pockets, watching the same scene. You okay? He asked. I thought about the question, really thought about it this time. Was I okay? I'd lost a company I'd spent 16 years building. I'd ended a professional relationship that had defined the most important years of my career. I'd contributed to the downfall of an institution that employed hundreds of families. But I'd also survived. I protected my team. I'd proved that experience and expertise had value, even in an industry increasingly obsessed with youth and innovation. I'd built something new from the ashes of betrayal. I'm getting there, I said finally. 6 months later, I was sitting in my home office on a Saturday morning, updating my LinkedIn profile with Apex's latest client win, when a notification appeared. Connor Mitchell had sent me a connection request. I stared at it for a long moment, my finger hovering over the mouse. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him sit with the awkwardness of having reached out to someone he'd so casually dismissed. Part of me wanted to reject it outright, a final middle finger to the person who'd started all of this. But curiosity won out. I accepted the request. 2 minutes later, a message appeared in my inbox. Ms. Caldwell, I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted to apologize for how I treated you and your team. I was arrogant and short-sighted, and I damaged careers and lives because I was too proud to listen to people who knew better than I did. My father was right about everything, especially about the value of experience. I've spent the past 6 months in executive coaching and therapy, and one of my assignments is to reach out to people I wronged and take genuine accountability. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I didn't then. You weren't blocking innovation. You were trying to save me from my own stupidity. I'm sorry. I read the message 3 times, looking for insincerity or manipulation or some angle I wasn't seeing. But all I found was what seemed like genuine remorse. I sat there for a long time, fingers resting on the keyboard, trying to figure out what to say. Finally, I typed, "Thank you for reaching out, Connor. I hope you learn from this experience and become the leader your father believed you could be. Good luck." It wasn't forgiveness exactly. But it wasn't hatred either. It was something more complex. An acknowledgement that people could grow, that mistakes could become lessons, that even the most painful experiences could have value if you let them teach you something. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, looking out at my quiet neighborhood. Spring had arrived while I wasn't paying attention. Trees budding, flowers pushing through the earth, everything coming back to life after a long winter. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Proud of you, Mom. For everything." I smiled, feeling something settle in my chest that had been unsettled for months. The golden parachute had been my safety net, the thing that gave me options when Connor tried to throw me away. The path I'd taken afterward, joining Apex, taking Crawford, building something new, that had been my survival strategy. But what I'd built with both, the team, the reputation, the company that now bore my fingerprints in every system and process, that was my legacy. And unlike Mitchell Industrial, unlike Connor's brief disastrous tenure as CEO, unlike all the things that could be taken away or destroyed by other people's decisions, this legacy was entirely mine. I'd earned it through resilience, through strategic thinking, through refusing to let anyone else define my value or determine my future. I picked up my phone and called Rachel. "Want to grab dinner tonight? I have some ideas for our next project." Because that's what builders do. We don't just tear down. We create. We innovate. We keep moving forward. And sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction at all. It's simply proving that the people who dismissed you made the biggest mistake of their lives. If this story of calculated justice had you hooked from start to finish, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Aubrey smiled and nodded politely while Connor had no idea about the golden parachute clause. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful revenge stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.